My name is Jason,
My name is Fraser.
I'm YG Mitchell.
and this is a comic strip AP debrief of Young at Heart. So, listeners, we have just finished up 7 episodes of Young at Heart. Fraser and YG have, and they were pretty great. I thought the series was very emotional. I thought the story had a lot of impact. Um, I thought Hoyt was often an asshole, um, but also, but that was maybe somewhat dictated by the dice, which were very, very. They leaned in one direction, as anybody who listened to it knows. Overall, though, it was just great. The sound effects, the music. Well, I guess it was just a light touch of music, but truly the audio work. It was all just very immersive and emotional, and I just really, really dug it. And so I thought it'd be fun to get you guys together to just get your thoughts on how the process went and to find out, sort of like behind the curtain, like how it was to put one of these together. Since you guys are the first ones to complete one of the comic strips, so I guess just at the outset, sort of a big picture kind of question is: are you guys proud of how it turned out?
Definitely, yeah. I'm very proud of it, and especially the ending. I'm really satisfied with how neat a bow we tied on it. I think.
Yeah, this is the first time doing anything like this for me, so I'm really pleased with how we maintained the story. That's one of the things that I was most pleased with, that we could maintain the arc through to the finish, and we didn't struggle too much to link things back to each other, and we didn't really like throw anything out that was random in episode 5, for example.
Right. Yeah. It did feel very coherent and very consistent throughout. Right. Like I haven't gone back and listened to the whole thing all as one production yet. Like I was doing it week by week, but I'd be very interested to go back and listen to it all together to see how that changes my thinking on it, to see if I experience it differently. But I think you guys are right though, in the sense of you guys really, really stuck the landing. One of the things that has been kind of in the back of my mind with this project is when we did the first comic strip AP on Discern Realities, the Dungeon World one, those just kind of theoretically go on forever, right? Like there's no predetermined endpoint. And so I was kind of concerned that like these more serialized ones that have a definite start and a definite ending, I was not concerned, but I was definitely interested to see how each of the comic strip teams like kind of, wrapped it up, right? And I think you guys did a really good job.
Yeah, the mechanics in the game help a lot. I think with that because it's basically like as soon as you're happy with the initial questions that we ask, which is pretty subjective, then it's time to tie it up, kind of thing. So yeah, when we were recording the second last episode, I think even we were like thinking initially that it was going to go for another 2 episodes, right? And then we started playing and we're like, actually, I think we have this answer, right? Because Hoyt Hoyt continues to be like this, right? Like we kept hoping that he was going to change, but eventually it just became clear that was Hoyt's story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I guess let's kind of segue over to like the actual format itself, the comic strip AP format, because this is somewhat unique in the world of role playing game actual play, right? The way we do this, and I'm not going to go into it now because I assume anybody listening to this understands the basics of it. But I guess what I'm asking, what I'd like to know from you guys is, how did it feel like from episode to episode? Like how did you think about what was coming up? How did you prepare for it? Because it's not like running a regular role-playing game, right? Like your whole perspective, your whole thinking is different, right? And I know that because I do them as well. For anybody who's not listening to any of mine, I also am involved in a couple of them. So like YG, just what do you think? Like how did it affect your sort of playing of the game, I guess?
The fact that the game deals in discrete scenes and each one is its own like a vignette, that made it really easy for me to be able to get a picture in my mind and try and convey that. And that's really different to the kind of role-playing games that most of us are used to, where we're just kind of running a rolling story and we might spend only 30 seconds in one place and then we'll jump over to another place and we'll jump over in time. With these discrete vignettes, it felt like we could really make the story feel coherent because of that.
Yeah, Fraser, what do you think?
I think that it was really interesting because initially I thought it was harder to do the format because whenever YG and I play, we get really like rolling and we're not used to stopping, right? When we're just like,
yeah.
oh yeah, we're feeling this particular scene, and then
The stopping is the trickiest part. Yeah.
yeah. And but what it ended up doing was, I think our ending would have been maybe completely different because we had like a significant break there because his internet went down. And I was literally just laying awake in bed trying to sleep when I had the thought for what my ending for Pride was going to be. I was just like, if this was literature, what would happen to this character, right? Like, what would the confines of the genre sort of dictate happen? And I'm like, oh my God, I have this ending, right? Whereas before, I don't think, like, if we had just got rolling, I don't think that I would have chosen that ending.
Well, I think it goes to like a sort of a bigger point, which I've made to other people who've asked about the project and kind of how it feels to do it and participate in it. And one of the points I always make, because I've got a lot of experience in the format with our other show, Discern Realities, but one of the things that I always try to convey to anybody who's interested in doing it or is interested in the process is that gap of time, that like waiting a week or so between recordings and keeping the recordings very short, it leads to a really high quality RP, right? Like an incredibly high quality RP. So we're getting like 15, 20-ish minutes of very, very like rich role play that I don't think would be the same if you were doing just like 2 hours straight, right? If you were just doing 2 hours straight, you're going to have a lot of dead time there. You're going to have a lot of stumbling and fumbling. Whereas the way we do these APs, these comic strip ones, you've got like a week to think about that next, good scene, and that was kind of what you were getting at a little bit there when you said you had that like little extra break. You've got time to kind of think about how you're going to approach certain things or stick certain things in the fiction. And I just, and overall the course of all the APs, like they're all like just they're of a quality that I know you won't get if you just played 2 hours straight, right?
Yeah. The thing I would add to that is I would probably distinguish role playing and driving a narrative. I think that space kind of gives you a chance to think of how the story's going to go and how you're going to make it feel. But the role playing for me anyway, and this is probably a personal experience, but the role playing is actually quite hard to get into because I can't just go in there cold and suddenly I'm embodying a character.
Right, yeah. I can see that, yeah. When you say role playing, you mean like the actual like sort of playing of your character. I guess like the sort of per se definition of role playing, yeah. I guess I'm meaning it more of in that other way you described, like that more sort of like we're all like the directors of our movie sort of approach, right? It's super interesting though. Yeah, it can be tricky to get into. Well, and here's something I would also say, because of Young at Heart's rules, I can see that being somewhat of a bit of an issue in this format because you don't play a single character the whole time in Young at Heart, right? You don't have sole responsibility for a character's actions, right? And so it's a little different, for example, on our Dungeon World ones, where I know I'm playing the NPCs, right? I know which NPCs are coming up, and I know how to think about what they're going to say and how they're going to behave. And David always plays, Domenico or Ramshackle or whoever, and so he can be thinking about just his point of view and perspective. So I think that might have something to do with it too.
Yeah, like it became a very meta narrative for Young at Heart, whereas you can tell like in the beginning you'll see us RP each character a lot more, whereas later on we become like puppeteers of both of the characters.
It's more authorial. Yeah,
yeah,
I noticed that too.
Yeah, in the scenes. Yeah, it's just because we couldn't like jump right into them anymore, but it was still like a different kind of pleasure orchestrating the scenes that way as well.
Fraser, this is your game. You wrote Young at Heart. Did you have to make any changes to like the game itself to support the format?
I think the only thing we did was in the text, I recommend that people choose a team, either Heart or Pride, and stick with it through the narrative. But YG and I have played so often that we prefer to fluctuate it, where one of us just chooses either or for what we have an idea for the scene. And I think it fits the format better that way. But if you're, for instance, like first time players, I think it'll be more helpful to stick your guns to a specific pride or heart, so that you only have to think about one thing and just gun for it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, because essentially the table kind of divides up in two, right? And then, you know, yeah, like you said, like one team kind of is the heart and one is the pride. That makes a lot of sense. And in fact, that actually, like, that's another one of those things where, you know, in that context, you kind of know what you have to be thinking about, right? Like, so you can kind of, you know, even if you're not playing like the same character all the time, you at least have like a sort of thematic drive, right? So I think that's important. Cool. Well, so I guess it would be criminal not to talk about the audio, because YG, I know you did the sound editing or the sound engineering on it. It was beautiful. It was so good. Very immersive. I like David and I, when we were doing the original comic strip APs and Discerned Realities, we don't do anything like that, right? we do no sound effects. Like, it's just me and him playing the game, and we still have stuck to that. Basically, we had a little bit of music at the beginning and end now, but so I didn't really like have any expectations as far as that kind of thing went. Like, I thought, you know, I knew every team would handle it a little differently, you know, but when I first heard you guys, that first episode of Young at Heart, I was like, oh my gosh, like, they are, first of all, they're gonna make the rest of us look really awful. Like, we're all gonna look so lazy. And then but once I got past that, I was like, this is really great. It's super immersive, super like, it just, I don't know, just it felt like radio drama. It felt like a radio play. And I think this whole project, that's been the most intriguing aspect of it to me, is like blurring the line between role-playing game and radio drama. And so I'm really into that. So I guess my question, though, there's a question in there. Like, what were some of your goals, YG? Like, what were your creative goals with the audio?
Mostly experimental, right? I agree that there's a line between radio drama and AP, and I wanted to find that, but I was really cautious about going too far into the radio drama side. Like, my personal preference is I wouldn't want to listen to a radio drama if it was a role-playing game, because you're listening for
you would want it to be scripted, you'd want it to be super tight, right? Yeah,
you'd have expectations narratively as well, and so that's on the editing side. So I wanted to keep some of the process discussion in there, and then for the ambient side, I wanted to know how far you can push the musical aspects of it, and some of the other APs have done it really well as well. How far you can push that without detracting from kind of, well, just two people discussing a thing, which is what it mostly is. There's not much acting involved. It's just a discussion. So there's definitely a boundary there that I was playing with and hoping that I could push against.
Yeah, with all the different comic strip APs, I think we have maybe 5 or 6 of them now, something like that, with like 2 or 3 more in the pipeline. They're all kind of like hitting different points in that spectrum, right? Like mine and David's, for example, we there's almost no audio flourish. Like, it's just me and David playing the game, right? And we really focus on the game part of it, right? Like, we're clearly like playing the game. We're clearly working through the moves and we're doing all that stuff. And when I'm doing it, I'm always super interested in just like imparting technique, right? Because I think that's what some people are listening to mine for, right? But then others, like Young at Heart, Sorcerer's kind of like a good middle balance between all of them, I think. Some of the others, though, it's definitely more of like, it pushes a little bit more toward the immersion side of it, the more storytelling aspect of it. I like the mix. I think it's great that there's so much variety. We had some people say, oh, well, what's the point of this? Like, am I learning how to play the game? Well, maybe. Or am I just listening for the story? Well, maybe. It could be both, right? Like, you know, so I thought that was a super interesting aspect. And I could see, you know, you guys were kind of like you in the first couple groups were the pioneers of this in some sense, because we, you know, I think as the project continues, we'll continue kind of exploring those boundaries, you know?
Mm-hmm. Just like with Dogs in the Vineyard, when they innovated with the sound to take over when the mechanics are happening, right?
It's so smart. Yeah, yep. I love that. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I think there's going to be, you know, new thoughts with new APs coming. Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's a good transition. I guess my question for you guys is, will you be doing another series, or will you be moving on to something else, or what are your thoughts? Are you still going to be involved in the project in some way?
Yeah, I think we're gonna do the Veil, right, YG?
I hope so.
Yeah, and we're gonna bring YG's vision of cyberpunk to the
Okay.
gauntlet. Yeah.
All right. Is that sounds very it sounds either like a promise or like an ominous threat the way you put it there. What does that mean? Your vision.
Well,
YG?
I don't know what it even looks like
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Yeah.
You don't have anything specific in mind there.
Yeah, but I'm always gonna be looking to. For me, I find it really satisfying subverting tropes from cyberpunk because it's such an '80s genre, right? And I just really love subverting what's established in the genre and then still saying this is cyberpunk, just to mess with people because it still is. But I think relevant cyberpunk is way more interesting than old stuff. So I'm interested to see what we come up with, and I want to still try and hit emotional play as well.
Cool. The Veil. Well, we shall look forward to that. Awesome. Do you guys have anything else you want to discuss before we wrap this up?
The talk of process was quite important for this game because it's a new game, right? And so that was really important for the editing to get exactly the right mix of explaining the game and describing it, but also not just going into not into reading the rules out for because most people won't have tried it yet.
I think that's going to be I think that's one of the more interesting aspects of the project is how do you translate like the discussion of mechanics, or how do you like handle the discussion of mechanics like on the mic. It's super easy with the PBTA games, right? Because they're so fiction first and the mechanics only kick in as needed, right? Whereas other games like, the mechanics are kind of they're kind of like they're the mechanics lead directly to the fiction, right? So it's somewhat inverse. And so that, that's an interesting observation for sure. Well, so let's just wrap up real quickly. Fraser, where can we get Young at Heart if people have listened to this and like, yes, I want a sports drama story game in my life?
You can get it at Drive-Thru, and it's also available at Lulu. And I'll be at Breakout Con in Toronto too with some copies, I think, too. So you might be able to just grab them from the vendor booth there.
Awesome. Cool. Well, guys, congratulations on finishing up your first series. It was really terrific again. And thanks for doing this debrief with me.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks.